Há 120 anos, a família Gerdau plantou a raiz de um sonho. Uma fábrica de pregos que virou uma das principais produtoras de aço do mundo. Enquanto crescíamos, fomos nos entrelaçando com a vida das pessoas. Hoje, reafirmamos nosso compromisso com o futuro, atuando em questões urgentes como habitação e sustentabilidade. Porque tão importante quanto o que colhemos são as sementes que deixamos para o amanhã. Gerdau 120 anos. O futuro se molda.
Pensar, sorrir, abrir, fechar, prender, unir, subir, voar, comer, dormir, beber, sonhar. Aço é ação. Aço é ArcelorMittal, criando aços inteligentes para um mundo melhor.
Tudo na natureza está interligado. A Vale entende que não dá para separar a Amazônia das pessoas que dependem dela, como o apicultor e a polinização da floresta, ou o extrativista e a colheita sustentável do jaborandi.
A gente vive da mata e com a mata. A gente vive em harmonia com ela.
Cuidar das florestas hoje é transformar o amanhã de todos. Vale.
Creemos en las ideas, en el diseño, en la gente y en su potencial. Nuestra pasión es innovar con el acero y hacerlo junto a nuestros clientes nos llena de orgullo. Acesco, la confianza que nos une. El mejor camino es el que recorremos juntos. Es el que construimos con esfuerzo y visión. Mega obras como estas llevan por dentro el sello de calidad Acesco. Acesco, la confianza que nos une.
CAP significa en Chile y el mundo acero de calidad. Acero producido con tecnología de punta y a partir de las mejores materias primas. Acero que sustenta el crecimiento de un país y que se hace presente en exigentes mercados internacionales. CAP Acero, conocida también como Compañía Siderúrgica Huachipato, está situada en Talcahuano, a 500 kilómetros de Santiago, en plena bahía de San Vicente. Su estratégica ubicación en la mitad de Chile continental, con terminal marítimo propio y conexiones viales y ferroviarias, favorecen su logística de recepción y despacho de productos. La empresa es parte del Grupo CAP, el principal productor de minerales de hierro y pellets en la costa americana del Pacífico, el mayor productor siderúrgico en Chile y el más importante procesador de acero del Cono Sur. La planta de Huachipato es la única siderúrgica integrada del país, dado que su proceso se inicia a partir de las materias primas básicas, mineral de hierro, carbón y caliza. Un proceso de estas características garantiza productos de acero de elevada pureza y calidad. En Chile, sus principales mercados son la minería, la industria y la construcción. Actualmente la empresa ha focalizado su negocio hacia la línea de productos largos. Dentro de esta hay 4 grandes familias de productos en las que CAP Acero se ha especializado, atendiendo los requerimientos de sus clientes y liderando su participación en el mercado interno. Barras gruesas, alambrón, barras para refuerzo de hormigón y aceros especiales.
Sabemos que todo está conectado en la naturaleza y que lo mismo se pasa para la energía y los procesos de producción modernos, ya que también trabajan con ecosistemas complejos vinculados digitalmente. Con nuestra solución, que es una simbiosis de planificación, producción y gestión energética, puedes crear una cadena de suministro sostenible y así asegurar su ventaja competitiva. ¿Estás listo para extender la mano para que juntos podamos percibir la complejidad, actuar de manera inteligente y adaptarnos?
Hola a todas y a
Hello
todos.
everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Bom dia. Buenos dias. Thank you. Over 5,000 people participated yesterday in the first journey of Alacero. Once again, I'm speaking from São Paulo with my Spanglish. I invite you to the first day of event. Let's go for it. Thank you, all the members of the Latin American industry who are here with us from all the countries in the region and the organizations who are our sponsors. So, the whole event will be broadcast in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. You can select the channel on Vimeo or on the platform. We invite you all to participate actively on the platform and to do some networking, meetings, and chat with all the viewers. So, participate in the live chat. We have some questions for the keynote speaker, Paulo Roca. We invite him and you to follow our networks at Red Alacero. Use the hashtag Alacero Summit 2021. Before starting with the speakers today, as Alejandro said yesterday, it is important that this meeting doesn't stop here. We must make these topics to transcend this day. And today we are gathered here, and this is the beginning so that we can achieve our goals. So now we are going to start our second day with the first panel, social and economical aspects in Latin America. And we are going to see the realities, perspectives, and challenges of Latin America after the pandemic. And now the moderator of this panel, Susan Siegel, the CEO, who is going to talk to Isabel Moreno, and the president of BEAD in 2005. And we have the director of foreign policy and writer of Actual Power. Welcome you all. Susan, you can start. Thank you very much for the invitation to be the moderator of this panel. We have two speakers, renowned one. We are going to talk about the current situation in Latin America. After almost 20 months after the pandemic, we are in an unprecedented time, and we are going back to normal slowly. It affected the whole economy in the world. And in my country, we have the rise of inflation and also the supply chain impact. We were gathered at COP26 some weeks ago, and we discussed the climate change issues and looking at topics that might change this overview throughout the regions in the world. And we also discussed about the world after COVID. And we discussed about growth, social impact, and a fair rebound for everyone. And we have bigger opportunities and challenges to face up to. So the pandemic resulted in an advancement in technology, and we are not going back from it. So now it's an honor, a pleasure for me to be with you, and I'd like to introduce you to Luis Alberto and Moises Naim. We are excited to hear from you. Let's start with Moises. How do you see Latin America in a world post-COVID? So the recovery, the rebound will be for everyone. We have equality in the region. Thank you, Susan, for the invitation, Alacero, for the privilege to be able to share ideas and to have this chat with all of you. This is a big question. What is Latin America like after COVID? It depends on the definition of after COVID. What does that mean? Undoubtedly, some trends that we have seen so far, they are there. In Latin America, we have 8% of the world's population, and we have one-third of the death rate in the world. So it reflects the weakness in our health system, and it's not easy to rebuild it and adjust it to the pandemic. So we have this weakness. And right after, we have a situation that we hadn't seen a long time ago. So it was something that was well known in Latin America, but it is the monetary, the currency part, exchange rate, intervention of the central banks, etc. Uh, there is a consensus that the world came into a time that is more inflation oriented, and it had been a long time since we had last seen this happen, but this is a current topic, inflation. Yeah, we have to identify the trend, the culture, and this we have observed the economical crisis, inflations, and all the impacts in the powerful countries in the world. And there were institutions that were there for a long time, and we thought that they were permanent, but they weren't. And we saw that they became transitory. When we know that the virtual work, remote work was important, but we had never thought that it would come to stay, to remain here. And today, the remote work is here to stay, and it's going to be important eventually as well, not only now. And we also have the political part, the democracy in the US, for example. They have been discussing it a lot. We had never thought about having a debate about the health, longevity, democracy in the US as it is now. We thought that many things were permanent, but they are transitory. And what was transitory is more permanent now. Luis Alberto, what about the fiscal and inflation points in the region? What are they like? We have talked about commodities that we are used to them, and how do you see all of this within the political panorama overview that we have in Latin America? How do you see these points? Susan, good morning. First of all, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Moises in this Alacero Congress. Thank you very much for the invitation. So the first point is that there is no doubt that this affect countries in different ways, as Moises said just now. Today we see an important rebound in Latin America, and it's a very different if we compare it to the industrial world. So the fiscal incentives have never been the size that they are now. For example, in Brazil, and we have some important incentives, fiscal incentives. And in inflation, we have observed that there is the need of adjusting it in a quicker way, because this step with inflation is much bigger. And we have this growth topic that is very unequal. The growth rate is high. Latin America as a rebate effect, but anyway, there will be some countries that will be ending this year while other won't. And there are still some countries that the growth rate, due to the COVID, the pandemic, their growth rate is still slow. But we want that, we know that this growth is not benefiting everyone. And we are leaving this pandemic with more debts, more fiscal issues, which are more precarious. And for example, Mexico that use fewer fiscal incentives than other countries, and they have different results. And we have many debts, and this is going to have its effects, and the central banks, above all Europe and the US, they are starting again to clip the or to adjust these fiscal incentives, And other countries have been observing all the effects that this might have in economy. Do you think we are going to have winners or losers in some countries? Moises, Luis Alberto, do you think everybody's going to lose with what happened or not? I think that the price of the basic products, they are at high prices. There are some commodities that are consumed more in more countries, and we have the effect of the exchange rates, the heights in the dollar currency, and this is going to gravitate in the next few years, and it will have some effects on the growth. And it's not the same for the countries that export a lot compared to those that don't. I think this is the biggest difference. Moises? Because of technical problems, I didn't hear your question. So the question was, do you think there will be winners and losers when we think about Latin America as a whole? Of course, the commodity pricing, price hikes on raw material, I think this has happened throughout Latin America. And the variable is fundamental, and it differs from the mood, the political, and the economy of the country in Latin America. So when the prices are high, the situation is more comfortable. The government has the possibility of implementing more ambitious social plannings. And when the commodities prices go down, and then we have some deficit, and there is instability. And which country benefited from this? One more than others. There are some countries that performed better than others, and it varies according to the raw materials, the political part of each country. And I'd like to repeat the topic because we have the flows, the financial flows in Latin America, and we are dependent on international investments in this region. And we have this break that happens suddenly, and some things, the access to international financing is reduced, and all the countries in Latin America depend on these international investments to have access to the international financial system.
Just like you mentioned, if the interest rates increase internationally, this will cause a very huge impact for all countries in Latin America. So moving on to another issue, let's talk about international markets. We've talked a lot about the opportunities of new shoring. So would that be a true opportunity? I know that the president of Mexico is in Washington and will discuss that during this week. But is that true, Moises, or not? What is your take on that? What do you think governments have to do to support that? And I direct the same question to Luis Alberto to comment a little bit on the private sector. Moises, the word is yours. So since I'm the former president of the IDB, I was supporting the production in Latin America. So we had the Made in America brand, and Latin America would be able to seize the opportunity of globalization and economic integration. But in reality, that is much more difficult. What we are observing today is a redefinition of the supply chains, and It's not correct, it's not certain that the dependency on China will slow down, will reduce. There are some advantages. Outsourcing and outshoring in China and Vietnam, there are good advantages and the margins in the high. So in order for it not to be interesting for the companies, there would have to be bigger barriers, and I don't see that today. It was a business reality. It was cheaper to produce abroad and transport the products and merchandise through just-in-time policies. Today, there's an anxiety that it's not just in time anymore, it's just in case. So to have a supply structure that is just in case. So I think that we're going to have a combination of both demand for more security in the supply, but also the need to seize the advantages of this type of production. Well, what is different regarding the past? Obviously, there's tensions between China and the United States, and a lot of companies are reconsidering the resilience that they have regarding their production chain. So we start to observe other alternatives from where to bring that production to have that as an alternative. So the first thing is that a lot of things could be produced in the United States, and that means a high rate of investment. On the other hand, Latin America has a huge potential, like countries like Mexico, like you mentioned. The President López Obrador is in Washington discussing about commerce between companies. So on one hand, we have to keep on working, and what will be determining to have a benefit with that change of the production chains regarding the costs that we have in Latin America, which are very high, costs of energy, transportation, and infrastructure, and that kind of penalize our production. So this is something that depends on the government and revolves around the competitiveness in the private sector. Regarding the companies, we're starting to see some of the opportunities. We have different types of industries, and for example, healthcare and pharmaceutical industries are going to transform into something central for the future. It's something new. The United States is really thinking about how to increase their pharmaceutical production worldwide. It's kind of a golden age for the healthcare sector, and I think we have an opportunity for Latin America, which has shown already infrastructure potential in Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. For example, the production of vaccines in a lot of countries. They started 34 years ago because of competitiveness, and there's still room there. Of course, that will depend on how the countries feed their competitiveness environment so that the companies can develop. One of the consequences of COVID is that we do not have economic openness. It's on the contrary, the economies are closing, and that makes these value chain transformation a little more difficult. So we have to show that we're going to be able to grow. And in Latin America, we have to grow. In Latin America, dealing with the external commerce and foreign trade. Moises, would you like to add on that? I completely agree with that, with what Luis Alberto said. Yes, it's a great opportunity, but the countries also have to facilitate, in a way, the openness, this openness for the companies. So moving on to another issue, and let's talk about climate change. It is a complicated topic for Latin America. The region has resources, natural resources, forests, minerals, oil, and that can support their economic development. So, Moises, what are the measures that the private sector should take, and also the governments, to deal with climate change in Latin America? There are several initiatives that are important. That varies from industries to industries, of course. So there is coal, hydrocarbon. So the companies have already admitted that they have to reduce their dependence on hydrocarbon. So the use of oil and coal will not disappear, but in 10 or 15 years, we will have a structure and a smaller demand, because companies have to become prepared for the decarbonization of their activities. So to fight that and try to stop that movement is not going to provide any results, because it's a global trend. Despite the frustrating results of the Glasgow summit, there are some concrete measures that will keep on happening. And once people start to feel the catastrophe and the climate change, they will put more political pressure to strive for more ambitious goals. So far, we've seen initiatives to increase. So there is not really a revolution in the policies of countries and companies. So we've seen a gradual adaptation. Maybe we have to wait for a huge catastrophe, both in frequency and intensity and localization. We're going to see things like hurricanes on the east coast of the United States. For example, a hurricane like Katrina will not hit only New Orleans, but Manhattan and Miami. So when that happens, the political climate regarding the ambitious goals will become a reality. And Latin America is really in that stage. Brazil is always at the forefront and on the headlines due to many reasons. And the world expects that Brazil, or the Brazilian government, takes a stance, an attitude that is more aligned with the climate change issues. Luis Alberto, I was in a conference, a panel last week, and it became clear that the private sector is aiming carbon neutral between 2030 and 2050. But some companies in Latin America, some people at that panel that I took part, seemed that they were doing something new. So what is your take on Latin American companies? So how is that going to impact the capital market? There are several activities in a lot of companies that are listed in the stock exchange. A lot of these companies, most of the global companies, have to focus on environment protection and ESG issues. So to reach net zero by 2050, and the circular economy is also a central issue. So all of companies are thinking about that. There are 3 types of scopes regarding emission reduction. Some of them have to do with the scopes 1 and 2, upstream, and others have to do with the suppliers. Things are still slow here, but a lot of investors and funds are thinking about this responsibility. And also on the streets, we have observed people concerned about environmental protection and a real policy towards that. We've seen economic proposals and candidates that want to stop oil production, and there are already tensions around that issue. In South America, 40% of the biodiversity of the world is in the region, and we haven't talked a lot about that, but we have the ability to storage tons of carbon, and if we did not have that biodiversity, the world would be in a pretty worse situation. So increasingly, the assets of financial institutions have to be remodeled, and we have to remodel the financial institutions in order to tackle that type of issue. So the regulations will keep on working to remodel the assets, for example. So this is something that shows us an opportunity. So what are the great themes in climate change that have not been resolved? We have not dealt with storage of renewable energy, for example. So we have huge lithium deposits in Argentina and Chile. So about 65% of the lithium sources. Also regarding energy efficiency. This is the CO2 storage is a technology issue, and there are opportunities for the private sector in Latin America, a lot of opportunity in innovation, because that's how we will be able to reduce emissions. I'm very concerned about climate change because if the world is focusing on climate change, we cannot forget that this development agenda is key. When a government has to decide between building hospitals or more education or investing in energy and also having to deal with climate change, what will be the decision of the government? Here in Latin America, we need funding to deal with climate change that allows us to close this gap so that we reach zero emissions by 2050 and everything that has to do with circular economy.
We have opportunities in education and new types of work, kinds of job, employment, in this line of business. And you also mentioned political pressure, and let's proceed with the political topic, okay? We are going to have several elections in Latin America this year and next year as well. So this week we are having next Sunday actually the first round election round in Chile, Colombia, Brazil, etc. So we have seen suspicion in the traditional countries, all right, in these political niche. What is the path for the region? We go to the right wing, left wing, center. How do you see that? Well, I have a major concern, and I think the most important categories, in my opinion, they are not left wing, right wing, or Republican, Democrat. I think that the biggest issue will be in the political systems, liberty systems, and some other topics which are autocrats. And the right or left wings, as a definition, doesn't work really well. It's popular, I know, but it doesn't work properly. On the left wing, we have economical actions that are seen as if they belong to the right wing. So in Bolivia, we also have FMI, and in Brazil, he couldn't qualify his political power as a left wing. So we have some right wing governments that they do things that we expect to see them from left wing. You see what I mean? So here the biggest question here is what kind of politics are going to sustain this autocrat regime to be more autocrats than democrats? So we have to think about it, and we must be concerned about it. Luis Alberto, the same question, but I'd like to know if there is room for having new leaders in Latin America. How do you see it? We have someone very young, for example, young candidates in Chile, for example. How do you see that? Yeah, undoubtedly, everything that we have seen so far, and with our children, the view that we have of the world, it's going to change. And as a consequence, I see a new generation that is more aware of politics issues, and they are aware of politics topics, and they want to work for companies that have this awareness. It doesn't mean that we know that to be a leader, it doesn't happen overnight. It comes along with a history experience, okay? And I agree with Moises. It's very easy to fall into this political necrophilia, to lose our direction, to miss our goal. So it's a phenomenon that is not only here in Latin America, it has been happening in the world. And now, more than ever, what we have to do is to be more daunting, to look ahead, to be able to operate in different ways in the world and the whole society. We must find solution for these conflicts, and they come from basic topics as construction, to rebuild the trust among people. And this moves through the states, the countries, and with that we can progress and celebrate those who are able to succeed and boost innovation in this region. But we are still a little bit trapped here stuck in a rut, and we have to bear in mind democracy, autocracy, in order to make things forge ahead. I'd like to touch upon the future because actually one of the fundamental elements, points is education. We have seen the impact of COVID, and the youngsters, they missed at least a year or two in their education because of the pandemic. And it's going to be harder to integrate them in society, these youngsters who were affected. And I'd like to hear your opinion on how we're going to solve this issue, this dilemma. How are we recovering everything that they've missed and educate youngsters for the future? If you want, I can touch upon this topic briefly, Susan. I think this is really relevant in several dimensions. First, 50% of the youngsters in Latin America, they could have access to this kind of communication that we have today because they don't have access to broadband or they don't have access to computer devices or they couldn't afford the cost to have internet, broadband, this kind of thing. And it's a reflection we must have. So, and it's bigger than what we think because we have all the resilience and discipline that education has. And we will have to remediate these 2 years somehow. We have to discuss it. If we don't start discussing it, every year it's going to be harder and harder because the education was affected and we must find results that are going to help us. Otherwise, we are going to be lagging behind countries such as Asian countries, such as Singapore, China. And another point is that we can already see that at about 50% of all the employments open that we have, we couldn't have enough people to get these jobs because people are not skilled enough. So we have to create schemes or strategies to have technical courses, temporary courses, and rethink educations and enable people, train people, skill people with the skills that are required for this century. And we have room in the private sectors to contribute and to request this guidance from them. And who are going to be the brains to guide education in Latin American? Yeah, it's good that you use the word guide, okay? The impact of the pandemic is not only for 2 years. The impact has come from 20, 30 years ago. So it's not an education system that works well, even before the pandemic. All the quality of the education is very feeble, very precarious, and universities are not prepared for the job positions that will be required for this new century, AI, data, and this kind of thing. So we have a bottleneck there. It has to do with our growth. And there is an opportunity to use artificial intelligence as a kind of springboard for education. And it is also a threat. AI is an opportunity, a springboard for their professional lives, but it can also pose a threat because it's going to there will be jobs and there will be professionals who will not be skilled to take up this job. So, and these skills are not acquired very quickly. So the challenge here is not only about how students have access to education. We need to fight against the big fraud. For decades, the youngsters, they go to a building called school, they go there but learn nothing, or they learn very little, or they learn things that will not be relevant for their professional life. So it's a fraud. Education in Latin America is fraudulent. And we have seen around the world innovation, but we are still very far from having the ideal education system. We must have a disruption on high scales and change the way education works. We have 3 more minutes, and I'd like to get to the last question round. This is my favorite topic, by the way. We are talking about the new generations of entrepreneurs, business people in Latin America, and we have seen something that is incredible during the last 5 years, including the pandemic. It's the rise of the new entrepreneur. Luis Alberto, you are in the lead of Nubank. So, what are the required ecosystems to support startups and promote entrepreneurship, in your opinion? Well, this is a fascinating world. I believe that everything that is happening with these entrepreneurs is that they have a global view. They are not limited to Brazil, Colombia, or Mexico. They want to conquer the world. It's very different from what happened to our generation. Second, they are very young as entrepreneur, and this didn't happen in our generation. And another thing is, for example, the connectivity is broad now. The payment systems, we have the fintechs. All of these have advanced a lot, and COVID played an important role to accelerate these digitalization processes. And half of the economy is informal, and we have many companies that are solving issues that were different in the way to provide credit access to people who didn't used to have it, bank accounts to those who have never had it. And a point is that we can't find enough talented people in a single country. We need to bring them from other parts of the world. And we have been optimists. We have all this innovation, and we have to move them throughout the world from one country to another, from one region to another. It's still on this topic. I'd like to add something to that, Susan. So these new companies that start as multinational, so they start in the past they started local and then became international, and we see companies starting international, global ones with ambitions to cross their border, and it's really attractive and fabulous for them. And we have this scale. In Latin America, we have unemployment issue here. Many youngsters, they are unemployed. They have informal employment. Most of them, they work in an informal way, and they don't have enough education. So these new startups that they become big really quickly, but they don't generate employment. They have a high scales on the supply chain, but they don't generate the jobs that Latin America needs.
Well, still on that topic, how can we solve that, Moises? Well, the Inter-American Development Bank has a huge journey on studying the reasons for the gig economy. there's a problem where a lot of people, young people, prefer to work on the gig economy instead of conventional companies. So there are several restrictions in the conventional jobs. So that's a way to understand the incentives for the gig economy. This is huge in Latin America and is related to that. If we have millions of young people working in the gig economy, it's going to be very difficult to be able to adapt the new technologies. And that is because these new technologies will be worldwide, but the generation of jobs will be insufficient. We still have 2 minutes, right? Well, I think our time is over. I would like to thank Luis Alberto and Moises, and we could keep on talking about this for hours because these are key issues for the growth in Latin America. So thank you both again. And I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, for participating in this panel. Thank you so much. Luis Alberto Moreno was Luis Alberto Moreno and Moises Naim, thank you so much. It was very interesting to hear your thoughts. We'll keep on going now with our keynote speaker, Paulo Roca, who is the chairman of the TechInt Group. And I would like to invite CEO of Gerdau and Alejandro Wagner to direct the questions from our audience. Please send your questions through our chat box, and Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Olá, Paulo, prazer saludar-te, contar com tua presença e tua visão.
Hello, Paulo. Thank you so much for being here, and we're looking forward to hear your thoughts about our current issues. So I'm going to introduce you, and then we're going to ask you a few questions. So, Paulo, the floor is yours. So thank you so much for having me. It's a great opportunity to be here. Thank you so much. I would rather have events in person because it influences the quality of discussions. But let's move on with our hybrid events and let's take advantage of this opportunity. So last year, when we were together at Alacero, I was moderating a panel with several people from the sector. And when we look ahead into the future, we could see the themes that are on the table now. It was very difficult to predict everything that has happened during the pandemic. During this recovery from the pandemic, right? Because we keep on rebounding and we have new waves still happening. But what I think is going on right now, it's a very big opportunity for our industry and our countries. It is an opportunity to redefine the value chain in the world. The recovery of the economy was very strong, but ended up creating problems in the value chain. So you can see problems in energy, in the car industry, in all different segments related to logistics. And all of that makes us think about the weakness of the value chain, the extended value chain, and the need to reduce the speed of the chain. Another thing that impacts the chain, I would say, is the increasing competitiveness between the United States and Europe and the tensions between the United States and China. There are important political issues, and we may think about competition, but all of that is ended up, it's actually a confrontation. So the influence of China in Taiwan and Hong Kong, all of that poses tensions for the whole world and also for the technology sector and manufacturing sector. So we are thinking about what would be a sustainable scenario that would oppose or actually face the tensions in the geopolitical arena. We are promoting changes in the energy sector. We had thoughts about this energy transition, considering the limits imposed by reality. And we have seen the energy crisis today in Europe. But energy transition is also part of the agenda of every company in the world today. Latin America has a very important competitive edge, which is very important for the steel supply chain. This is a value chain that may change our societies, that may create jobs, and also allow Latin America, that is only responsible for 30% of the companies in the world today. And in Europe, 60% of the companies are inside this value chain. After different deals with the Canada and the United States, all of countries in Latin America are kind of on the side. There is a concentration of exports of raw commodities and products in the last 20 years. And that was very relevant. If we consider a country like Brazil, they have industrial exports of circa $70 million. Mexico has $350 million of industrialized products. So that is a huge difference. When we talk about per capita, we are at about $350. Mexico has exports at circa 3,000 per capita. So that weakness causes weakness in institutions and the social mobility, different social inequalities in our countries. So we have an opportunity in the future to participate as leaders, redefining this chain. And we have to think about that in the steel industry, and we have to work towards that. It is a new opportunity, and there's a competitive edge to use steel regarding the energy transition. In my opinion, it's our great challenge. And this is where our industry is right now. We have a very key strategic position right now. I will leave it at that by now. Okay, Paulo, so let me start with Alejandro. Thank you so much, Paulo. Let me start with one important issue for me and for the companies, which is people and culture. Like the Americans say, it's all about people. And like Peter Drucker also says, all of this is a strategy for breakfast. So we have offers of jobs in the digital sector in Brazil, and it's difficult to attract people in that area. So my question to you, Paulo, would be, what would you say to a student in the university in Latin America about their choice of going to work? How can we attract more talent? Well, that's a critical issue for our companies. I think that resources and the ability to attract talent is fundamental. There are things that we have to push for. One of the things is the value that is offered by the industry to the communities. So I think there's an elite that comes from the greatest universities, and this elite is very well prepared in Latin America. But this is a different aspect of this precarization. There are people that can be very successful regarding technology, but when we think about the community and the poverty in our countries, we realize that we also have to have jobs created by the industry if we want the governments to have governability in the long run. But to attract those talents, I don't think it's only related to knowing the purpose of the companies. And I also think that we have to work with innovating projects inside our companies. I think young people want to work with innovation, with projects that have expansion and that consider reality in a different way. Digitalization is an aspect that we can use to attract young people. We can also combine those issues with conventional industry within our chain. So we can work with digitalization that also solves problems. So digitalization of the processes, of the chain, the value of the culture, and redefining the trade channels to build leadership. We have to build culture. We have to build innovative projects to attract talent. Yes, these are very interesting and important themes like diversity. Our industry has an image. Our industry does not pay a lot of attention to diversity, and we can change that. We know that there are challenges. We know people that work in the steel industry. Everybody knows about diversity, the relation with community, and the contribution to arts growth. That is fundamental, and with that, we're able to attract an innovative project with vocation to create and enlarge, expand diversity, focusing on environment and also on safety. And also projects are connected to the environmental issue, like carbon capture, the use of energy, developing renewable sources. So when we think about the agenda of our industry in our chain, there are innovative projects. For me, leadership is key, and we have to work on that and work on the image of the industry to propagate what we do in universities, to spread that, because there's a migration of brains. When someone in Buenos Aires works for Amazon and works from home, they are definitely migrating their brains for out of the country. That doesn't really solve the problem, and the challenge persists. We have a continent and a huge population.
Good morning. I'm Alejandro Wagner. My special thanks for being with us. We addressed several topics of questions, and there is a topic that you brought up, and it is really interesting. And you talked about innovation, attracting talent, and these 2 points, they are extremely necessary. And at this point, it's interesting to understand that everything has a cost. So this is my question. What is your view? For example, what do you think about our clients, the steel supply chain that we're in? Do you think our clients are prepared? Do you think they recognize this cost? Are they willing to pay for it? And the second question is about the government, if the government is ready to support this process. Well, behind this question, and thank you for this question, by the way, and this is a topic of big dimension, how we are going to distribute the cost of this transition. This is a big question for society in the whole world. Indeed, currently people have been discussing this transition, and we heard that during COP26. For example, energy is associated with this planet in a deep way. This discussion between India, emerging countries, developed countries, about how to reduce the energy consumption and who pays, after all, for the transition itself. And with a lower income rate. And we have to measure this cost and analyze if it can be afforded by consumers or clients. This is a debate that has just started. When we think about the cost of this transition, who is going to foot it? For example, we have growth in Germany, China, India, and African countries, for example. And they are having a macro discussion based on what I'm saying here. And there is a division within our supply chain. And this debate has just started. And first, we have to analyze what's the real cost of this transition. Is it possible to mitigate, minimize it, or not? Clearly, we have a reduction of, for example, if we reach this energy consumption reduction, we have to analyze. And in order to achieve that, we must change the energy matrix of our company in order to do that. Include some systems for renewable energy, use hydrogen to improve this reduction process, absorption of CO2, and all the settlement that we need to have for that. And there is a cost to make this change. And it is clear for everyone that our steel supply chain has to absorb it because we have to analyze it and see what we can do. We can do our job with a higher skill, with more quality, but in my opinion, I don't think that we can take in all these costs. But I think that the government, the politics, they can help us absorb this cost. They can give us some tax relief, for example. We can see what is going on in Europe and several discussions, and these discussions are not far ahead in the countries. If you look at it, in Europe, for example, the energy cost is multiplied by a high number. The energy, it's about $60, the consumption price. So what they want to do is to reduce the consumption, but consumers, they can have this price reduced by the amount that they consume. If they consume less, they pay less. But it's still under discussion. We've just started to see, for example, clients saying, oh, what do I have to do to have a different pricing? For example, for a green car, for a specific product. We have to have this discussion and find out what is the price that consumers are willing to pay. For example, in order to have this reduction, we have to forecast the speed that this is going to be transferred to consumers, and to find the best process to follow. And we must make all the initiatives available on the table, everything that we can do to minimize the costs, consumptions, and we know that after all, we are going to be focused on renewable energy, emission zero, everything will be based on that. But we need to find our way to these points. And the sequester of carbon, all of these topics. We have to bring up these topics and define a project for them. But I don't know if we can predict the advancement speed and all this transition in our supply chain and the willingness of consumers to be paying for this cost of transition. Yes, still about it. You mentioned about tax relief and the complexity of this global challenge. And it is a sector that is totally integrated about this motion of the steel industry. And there is an interesting debate that is going on in Europe, throughout the region. There are some countries that they are placing some carbon taxes and so on, but we know that this topic is very complex. It started in Europe and now it became global. I know that the only way that the world can face up to this challenge would be by means of negotiation, a global negotiation about this tax, the price of carbon on a global level, and all the regions, all the countries must be part of it. And then I think we can have a game changer there. And we can see a mechanism that would be the only way to deal with these points. And I think that this is the only way to have this leveling frame field without having conflicts, international conflicts among the countries. To define the application of this mechanism, and it would imply into a structural reform. And this hasn't been considered yet. It would be an action based on duty, and the information should be the same throughout the world. But it's still not clear to me. We need the mechanism adjustments to make an extraordinary result, because we measure the coal cost in each country, and it varies a lot. And we need to define a duty, a tax in Europe. But this brings impact to the export of Europe, because this tax will be levied on the products made in Europe. There is a complexity to implement this mechanism and it's really huge. It's a huge challenge. So I know that it will take a long time in order to make that happen. And if in Europe, if they choose to do that only in Europe, the country will have some impacts, mainly on the export side. And in Europe, there is a high level, a high cost of energy consumption, but we also have a great deal of participation in renewable energy, and it's 60% higher than any other region. I'm talking only about renewable energy and hydraulic energy, and what we need is a national or international supply chain agreement, and think about how to act on it. Bear in mind this context. To my mind, for example, the Americas, the US, Mexico, Central America, South America, we should have a discussion, a debate about how to equalize the coal cost, at least starting in this region, as Europe is doing there. We should do the same here in the Americas. And we should have this carbon border mechanism in each country and have a perspective that would be more optimistic. And for Alacero, this is extremely important to work in Alacero to understand the possibility of building this agreement among the Americas would be very important.
Okay, so moving on to a new topic. Let's talk about China. Let's talk about the supply-demand supply chain. You know a lot about the global steel market, and we have a question about China. In 2020, during the pandemic, China increased its steel production compared to 2019, when the rest of the world reduced its production. And today, in 2021, we've seen a reduction in their production. So my question is, the excess of capacity is still a problem in China? Well, for us, it's very uncertain and it's not clear what's going on in China right now. When I used to work at All Steel, one of the goals that we had back then, back in the 2000s, was to integrate China, to understand the participation, to create a dialogue that would allow us to understand their position and the factors that determine the dynamics in China. And we were not able to do that. So, for example, today, how much does the government decide to reduce the steel production? And in a few months, they're able to reduce from 15% of monthly production. We do not know what are the reasons behind that. Are they reducing the exports? Are they reducing carbon use? It's a problem that may arise regarding the control of the companies in China. You've heard about the real estate problem in China, and there's a lack of transparency there. So it's hard really to understand what are the drivers that sustain those key decisions that affect the industry. When we talk about steel reduction, we are talking about a monthly reduction at a rate of about 10 or 12, 15 million tons. So we are really talking about an unthinkable process. China produces about 50 or over 50% of the steel in the world. That's a huge figure. So for me, the changes that are going on, they are very difficult to interpret, and it's hard to make predictions of what such a concentrated, centralized government and authoritarian government will do. It's a government that has the means to change the whole dynamic in the industry. And so what's going to be the decision that they're going to make? We talked about the excess of capacity. We have also talked about what we've observed during this year. That is the increase of the demand outside China, and that is also important. But it's really difficult to assess if there's really an excess of capacity. And that puts into evidence the reduction that we have observed. But so far, we do not have transparency regarding the objectives, regarding the governance in companies. And so decisions are really made by the state. And that is in their own interest and not really the direct interest of the companies. So all of that adds a lot of complexity to the issue. We have worked in a committee studying this excessive capacity. And our conclusion was that this lack of transparency places a lot of barriers for a real understanding of the situation. I think the energy transition is also another important topic that poses another challenge. It's a question of sustainability, and a lot of that comes from China. China steel production represents almost 90% and in terrible environmental situation. So what is the policy in China? To close their economy like they have done in the last few months? So that's a different logic, and we do not have the answers so far regarding China. Right, so to close, I would like to ask you a question from our audience. So how can Latin America take advantage of the disruption in the steel industry? So you have mentioned about the opportunity of reshoring, and we have talked about that in the previous panel, and Moises had a pessimistic view. It could be an opportunity for Latin America, but it's a long pathway. There are a lot of difficulties, and the cost is still very high. So it is still important to reduce the cost and not localize the plants. So I think this is a great opportunity, and there's a need for our countries. It's not really an option. I agree with Moises because in the last 20 years, and if we compare what happened in the 1990s, we have seen that this process has moved towards a different direction. Brazil had over 60% of its industrial products. Today, it's basically 40%. The same happened in Argentina, but not in Mexico. Mexico has really built and invested in its value chain. So what would be the pathway? In the companies in the private sector, we have to reconsider the role of the private sector in Latin America. We cannot have countries where there's an increased role of the state to sustain the population that it's unemployed or works in the gig economy. So we really have to rebuild the role of the private sector, because the private sector is the one who builds the value chain. These are people who are going to talk to Toyota, General Motors. So when the companies can manufacture or transform some of the chains in integrated chains in Latin America in a more robust way with lower logistics costs and lower environmental impact. So today, we can offer steel with lower emissions than those offered by China and Japan or Europe, for example. So we have to take advantage of that. The private business have to work with the governments so that they can work on that. Big companies are aware of the need to reshore. And so in that sense, people are aware that one accident in the airspace in Taiwan can significantly change the whole chain with impacts that may be bigger than the pandemic posed. So we are not very far from facing situations of emergency in the chain. We are facing this type of situation in our companies regarding supply chain, microchips, regarding some inputs, and regarding energy. That's what's going on in Europe right now. So private businesses have to work. The conditions are favorable, and we have to work a lot so that the governments create conditions for a recovery of the private sector, for a leading role in the economy. I understand the pessimism regarding the last few years. And not only 5 years, but 30 years. And I believe that we have to put a stop to that. Because if we do not have, if we're not reliable, we won't be able to attract talent to build that base. And we have a very innovative project in that sense. We still have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you another question from our audience. So we have a question from Mexico. Mr. Paulo Rocco said that the goal is to increase the consumption per capita in Latin America. How much did we advance towards that goal regarding steel consumption? So during the pandemic, it was reduced, but now we are consuming more steel per capita than in the period pre-pandemic. And we have observed that in the last few months, but I would say that consumption is still about 120 kilos in Brazil, 100 kilos in Argentina, and 80 kilograms in Colombia. That is nothing compared to the consumption in the United States and in Europe. And considering the differences in Latin America, we still have room for growth, just like we talked last year as well. So I would also like to say that if we are not able to change that in the next couple of years in the Latin American countries, these countries will have a governance deficit because we will have a lack of productivity, a lack of education, and a precarization of the economy does not allow a good governance and social economic advancements. On the contrary, so that in order to be able to have a leading role in the value chain is to increase the quality of education and transform that in better income for our societies. And if we're not able to do that, I think that the complexity issue in Latin America will be bigger than what we have right now. It's a challenging message. It's an opportunity for Latin America. So, Paulo, thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for having me. I wish you a lot of success and congratulations on organizing this event. It was very, very interesting, and I think it was extraordinary that you already have an audience there. And I hope we can go back to in-person meetings very soon. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paulo Rocca. Thank you, Gustavo Werneck and Alejandro Wagner. So I invite you to keep on following us at our networks. Use the hashtag Alacero Summit 2021, post comments and pictures. It is important to be in social media. So right now, we will have a 10-minute break, have some coffee, visit our platforms, and enjoy this 10 minutes. We'll be back with a panel focusing on the challenges and capturing talents, and we'll talk about diversity as well. We'll be right back.
120 anos, a família Gerdau plantou a raiz de um sonho. Uma fábrica de pregos que virou uma das principais produtoras de aço do mundo. Enquanto crescíamos, fomos nos entrelaçando com a vida das pessoas. Hoje, reafirmamos nosso compromisso com o futuro, atuando em questões urgentes como habitação e sustentabilidade. Porque tão importante quanto o que colhemos são as sementes que deixamos para o amanhã. Gerdau 120 anos. O futuro se molda.
Pensar, sorrir, abrir, fechar, prender, unir, subir, voar, comer, dormir, beber, sonhar. Aço é ação. Aço é ArcelorMittal, criando aços inteligentes para um mundo melhor.
Tudo na natureza está interligado. A Vale entende que não dá para separar a Amazônia das pessoas que dependem dela, como o apicultor e a polinização da floresta, ou o extrativista e a colheita sustentável do jaborandi.
A gente vive da mata e com a mata. A gente vive em harmonia com ela.
Cuidar das florestas hoje é transformar o amanhã de todos. Vale.
Creemos en las ideas, en el diseño, en la gente y en su potencial. Nuestra pasión es innovar con el acero y hacerlo junto a nuestros clientes nos llena de orgullo. Acesco, la confianza que nos une. El mejor camino es el que recorremos juntos. Es el que construimos con esfuerzo y visión. Mega obras como estas llevan por dentro el sello de calidad Acesco. Acesco, la confianza que nos une.
CAP significa en Chile y el mundo acero de calidad. Acero producido con tecnología de punta y a partir de las mejores materias primas. Acero que sustenta el crecimiento de un país y que se hace presente en exigentes mercados internacionales. CAP Acero, conocida también como Compañía Siderúrgica Huachipato, está situada en Talcahuano, a 500 kilómetros de Santiago, en plena bahía de San Vicente. Su estratégica ubicación en la mitad de Chile continental, con terminal marítimo propio y conexiones viales y ferroviarias, favorecen su logística de recepción y despacho de productos. La empresa es parte del Grupo CAP, el principal productor de minerales de hierro y pellets en la costa americana del Pacífico, el mayor productor siderúrgico en Chile y el más importante procesador de acero del Cono Sur. La planta de Huachipato es la única siderúrgica integrada del país, dado que su proceso se inicia a partir de las materias primas básicas, mineral de hierro, carbón y caliza. Un proceso de estas características garantiza productos de acero de elevada pureza y calidad. En Chile, sus principales mercados son la minería, la industria y la construcción. Actualmente la empresa ha focalizado su negocio hacia la línea de productos largos. Dentro de esta hay 4 grandes familias de productos en las que CAP Acero se ha especializado, atendiendo los requerimientos de sus clientes y liderando su participación en el mercado interno. Barras gruesas, alambrón, barras para refuerzo de hormigón y aceros especiales.
Sabemos que todo está conectado en la naturaleza y que lo mismo se pasa para la energía y los procesos de producción modernos, ya que también trabajan con ecosistemas complejos vinculados digitalmente. Con nuestra solución, que es una simbiosis de planificación, producción y gestión energética, puedes crear una cadena de suministro sostenible y así asegurar su ventaja competitiva. ¿Estás listo para extender la mano para que juntos podamos percibir la complejidad, actuar de manera inteligente y adaptarnos?
cambia si nosotros cambiamos. Mira bien. Todo está conectado. El futuro es verde, sustentable. Somos la industria que crece, potencia, transforma. Somos la comunidad que avanza hacia un mundo nuevo. El tuyo. El de ellos. El nuestro. Desde lo más pequeño a lo más grande. El acero nos conecta.
Olá a todos. Vamos volver.
Hello everyone.
Estamos já listos?
Let's resume. Are you ready to get back to our agenda for today? So we still have 2 more panels in this journey, with very interesting topics and interesting ones for our current context and the future context. So now we continue with the next conference. So now we are going to talk about acquired talents in different organizations. This is something that we have heard more and more, and it attracts the attention of companies and people. We are going to have João Torres, CEO, plus diversity, and the participation of Sergio Kaufman, CEO of Argentina, Mariana Castro. She's the Vice President of Sales at Mercadotecnia and Operations. And Marcela Mejia, she's the only CEO who is a woman in Latin America in this industry. Good morning, everyone. So we have João here. Hello. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So everyone who's here with us, we have our friends online. We are going to start discussing these diversity topics, inclusion topics. I'm really in love with it. I've worked with these topics for almost a decade, and I keep on learning about it. So before starting this panel with so inspiring people, I'd like to talk about diversity, inclusion, and what do they mean, and how can we implement it to the organization. So we are going to start with the global CEO of Netflix, and we are going to discuss the relevance of these topics and all the relevance. There is this famous sentence: diversity is to invite you to a party, and inclusion is when someone invites you to ask you for a dance. So diversity and inclusion, they are twin words, they are sisters, they are concepts that are always together, but they don't mean the same. I'm talking about diversity and inclusion. I'd like to bring a provocation here. Do you believe that your country is a diverse country? So, for example, Brazil. Brazil is one of the most diverse countries in the world, and when I take a step ahead and I ask myself, is Brazil an inclusive country? Is it so diverse, so inclusive as it is diverse? I wouldn't say so, because Brazil is one of the most diverse countries in the world and one of the least inclusive in the world. And we start understanding that they are opposite. So the more diversity that I have in an environment, the bigger is the challenge to make that environment 100% inclusive. What are we talking about here? So when we talk about diversity, it takes us to these characteristic groups that makes us all unique people. So diversity is related to our race, gender, sexual orientation, nationality, our accent, our educational background, different point of views. Everyone is diverse. All of us are diverse people. Diversity is not one group or another. Actually, when we discuss diversity, we are discussing about 80 billion people, diverse people. There are many people going away from this debate. But we have to understand that diversity means that people are different, they come from different people, they have different desires, they have different needs. And from that point on, I can customize it and check what makes that person unique. What is the diamond the person has inside so that I can extract it, so that the person can make the most out of their skills, abilities, talents. So, and inclusion is more qualitative. If I understand that everyone is diverse, I understand that they have different challenges. For example, men and women in organizational environment, both men and women, they must test themselves in the professional environment. Men and women must provide good results. Both of them have it. And women, in addition to that, they have to surmount some invisible barriers that are posed by the chauvinism in our society, that men don't need it. If we take other groups, I'm talking about the race part, white and black people, they must deliver results and prove they are good professional, but black people, they have extra challenges to surpass, overcome, surmount these invisible barriers that are posed by racism. When we discuss diversity, I'm not discussing about giving privileges to one group or another. It's how to knock out these barriers that are invisible, that some groups have and some other groups don't. We have equity. Everybody has the same capability to compete for the same thing. Otherwise, it's unfair because some groups, they have more struggles than other ones, and they cannot even compete against each other. When I discuss these topics within the corporate environment, I'm talking specifically about diversity. Diversity represents a quantitative challenge for corporations. And inclusions is the social representativeness. I look at Brazil and I think, so in the world we have 50% of men and 50% of women. I'm talking about representativeness. Do I have it here? 50% of men and 50% of women represented in all hierarchy levels. So it's quantitative. I can draw a dashboard and count how many people, which characteristics, traits that I have in the hierarchy levels, making how much money they are. So the inclusion is qualitative. It's a challenge of cultural change. As I make the annual management of the environment of my company, I must take into account the inclusion. As it is qualitative, it's not so obvious to measure it. Inclusion, I measure it by analyzing perception, the environment, the atmosphere. I do deep interview with the leadership, focal people. As it is more qualitative, it's a little harder to be measured, but inclusion ensures all the results from diversity. So Hugo did this project called Aristotle. I love it. So Google looked at all his teams. Why there is a difference on performance? Why some teams are highly productive and some others aren't? Some other teams, they have results that are under performance. They got curious. What is different about them? They started mapping all the teams regarding several criteria points. And so this study is public. You can find it on Google, all right? You can find it. And they reached to a factor connecting the most high performance teams. So the most productive teams in the world, they are psychologically safe team. They feel psychological safety. So we need to think about the security and safety of our workers, yeah, to preserve the physical security of people and the safety. Are we thinking about the psychological part? Do you think, are you sure if the environment where the person are inserted in is safe, psychologically safe for these people? If they feel safe to open their mind in a vulnerable way or not. If this environment is not psychologically safe, there is a high chance for that people to be living in a toxic environment. As a consequence, this person will not be comfortable to make the most out of their skills, and they will not deliver good results as a consequence. So Google drew this conclusion that people who are psychologically safe, they are not afraid of being judged, and they feel safe to bring their reality to the table. This is a chart just to contextualize it, because we don't have any new idea, and there is much to be discussed about inclusion and diversity. It's very obvious. People who have different perspectives, they cannot see the challenges through different perspectives. We have this VUCA world, volatile world. People sum up the problems in a more complex way. So diversity brings results to business. So McKinsey for many years has been carrying out this survey every year, showing how diversity and inclusion, they are directly connected with the business results, the organization results. So these graphs made by McKinsey, they compared competitor companies considering several factors. For example, if the employees, they inform that there is a teamwork in diverse company, this was more noticed than the less diverse company. The psychological safety, we can see this difference if they promote innovation, engagement, retention of employees, profitability. McKinsey noticed that the most inclusive and diverse company, they reach better financial results. Of course, people can be whoever they are engaged, they see opportunity to grow, they want to work in an environment that is free of prejudice. Of course, they are more engaged with the company. Just to start wrapping up, we have noticed that ESG agenda has been booming the last few years. It's no news. It has been discussed by UN for almost 20 years, and ESG is interesting because we have the financial criteria of profitability in a company equal to the social criteria, environmental, and governance levels. So the company must have both results, financial results, and likewise taking care of the environment, people, and has a governance system that will prevent corruption, for example, when you have governance well implemented. And just by answering this survey by PwC, by next year, 50% of the investors, they will stop investing in companies that don't have solid practice on ESG. So it shows us the urgency of these topics, and this is my recommendation to you. The best moment to take action is now. I see many people, they are paralyzed. Oh, wait, when we get to this scenario, we're going to do this, and that. When we reach the ideal place, ideal time, we are going to act. No, that's not the path to follow. We must take action now to make a transformation in our society, in our organizations, and make them more inclusive and diverse. This is the message I have to convey to you. So now we go to our panel with our incredible guests here. So I'm gonna invite each one of them. They are already here with us. So I'm gonna sit here, and now we are going to change to Spanish. Welcome you all. It's an honor to have this opportunity to moderate this panel with people who are so engaged in diversity and inclusion. We have here from Colombia, Marcela Mejia. She is the general manager of Occidental steel industry. Mariana Castro, the sales vice president in operations in Latin America for Microsoft, and Sergio Kaufman, his CEO of Accenture Argentina and the South American Hispanic region. You are all welcome. Marcela, let's get started. So just to start, can you tell us a little bit about your personal, professional journey and how these touch upon the integration part?
Thank you so much, João. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Alacero, for inviting me to talk about diversity. My case is very particular because not only am I representing women, 7% of women in leadership roles in Colombia, but I am also in a sector that is very masculine. So my life, just like my life has always been surrounded by women. I have other 3 sisters. My parents were very loving and protective, and my mom had a character that was very strong, and she always told us that we could do whatever we wanted. So I'm sure about the responsibility that we have towards our children. And the gender issue stems from the structure in the family. So I was raised and went to a religious school. And 37 years ago, I decided to study engineering. It was a very masculine career. And the first meeting that I had with the dean of the university, he told me not to work and study systems engineering because I would be taking an opportunity from men. So the dean tried to convince me to take a more feminine, quote unquote, career. So I decided to keep on studying. He made me continue to study that. When I graduated, I married my husband, the son of my daughters. I have 2 daughters. So Luis Fernando has always given me support, and thanks to him, he's the least chauvinistic person that I've ever known. He supported me in my profession. And the statistics show that one of the main barriers that women have is that we have to dedicate 8.4 hours a week to take care of our homes. So when I started working in the steel industry, it was a great opportunity for me, and that gave me the opportunity to put into practice everything that I've learned. I started developing a software for procurement of raw materials. And then I moved on to other processes like international trade, procurement, and then I reached the general manager title. As a woman, I had to work harder to get to where I am now. I had to prepare myself. I had to be always up to date. Because during the meetings, I had to earn the respect of everyone. One of my strong points is that I love my job. I see all the challenges, and in the steel industry, you don't have time to just be upset. I'm very proud to be a woman, and I think one of the most important things is to be a leader by example. So I'm very fulfilled as a person and in my profession. I appreciate all the trust that people put into me. And the social responsibility is something that is part of the culture since the beginning. And to close, I would like to say that every year, whenever we would have the El Acero Summit, whenever I was in line for the registration, there were a lot of men. And people would always tell me, oh, just go ahead to that desk to find out about tourist options. Thank you, Marcela. So, Mariana, could you talk a little bit about your personal story? Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me and for the opportunity to be at this panel. I just loved what Marcela told us, and some stories are very similar. I have also studied systems engineering a while back, and it's basically a masculine career. I've been at Microsoft for 30 years now, and this was a very interesting opportunity to grow in a company that appreciates diversity and places a lot of effort in inclusion and diversity. Throughout my career, well, I was born and raised in Buenos Aires. I have studied at the engineering school, and I've always wanted to work at a company like Microsoft. So I studied, I prepared myself, and I was the second employee at Microsoft Argentina. And thanks to a lot of effort, but also the support of my mentors, in an environment that allowed me to grow, I was able to develop different abilities like sales, marketing, operations, etc. I have always wanted to pursue knowledge, take risks. I was always willing to take risks and to learn a lot. After a few years, I moved to the Caribbean region. For a while, I've spent a lot of time in Miami. And thanks to these opportunities and the mentors and the ability to take risks, I moved to Japan. Japan is the least diverse place that I know, I think, but it was a great learning opportunity. I say least diverse because the Japanese culture has very strong values, and how could I put it? They are very proud of their origins. They have rooted values, and it's very difficult to be a woman, a foreign woman, and to work in that kind of environment. When they offered me the job in Japan, my first question was, are there any CEOs or executive women in Japan? My title was a COO, and in Japan is our third largest branch. So my question was, are there women working in executive levels? And the answer I got was no. Women would sit at the table, or actually they would not sit at the table, they would be sitting on chairs on the sides of the room. Men would not look at me when they replied, they would not reply to my questions. So it was a very huge lack of diversity. But inclusion actually started with me because I was open to another culture, I was willing to learn, and I was there. I was there because I had my values, I had my abilities, and I would provide things that would add value to the local operations. So that was a big experience for me. So we got there, me, my husband, and our two daughters. And just like Marcela said, thanks to this ability thanks to people supporting us, my husband left his career, went with me to Japan so that we could, live as a family there. I have 2 daughters, and I always try to explain and show them these experiences that I had, and I'd like to show them that they can do whatever they want. I've been at Microsoft for almost 30 years now, and I have a responsibility and the opportunity to help other women so that they keep on growing in our industry. I'm talking specifically about the tech industry, but I think it's similar to what happens in other industries. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you, Mariana. And Sergio, what is your take on diversity and how does it add value? Well, if we're going to start about with personal stories, this started for me when I was 3 months old, because my mom decided that she was going to continue studying and working. So my mom would leave me with the dean's secretary to take classes. And so that's how I was raised. So a message to women is be aware of the sentiment expressed by society. My mom is 82 and she keeps on working. My dad died very early on. He was a doctor. And so my mom had to raise 3 children. She did not want to stay home. She wanted to keep on studying. And I don't have any problem with that. She left me with when I was 3 months old, and that's fine. I have the greatest memories. So these things are we tell these stories all the time in the family. I've been in Accenture for 30 years now, and some consulting areas are still very chauvinistic. So we cannot be creative and have innovation if we're not different. This is very, human. So think about it. If you form a soccer team with people that are all the same as no, you don't. You get people that are different from you. In the company, it's the same thing. If you form a team that people do not have to explain anything because they're not different, then you won't win. So you cannot think outside of the box if we all think alike. Diversity is a fundamental concept today. Today at Accenture, we have 15,000 employees, and some areas have more than 50% of women. When we ask about managing levels, I think in Argentina we have 49% women, 52% in the managing level. So we started to work like that because let's move on to talk about tolerance. If I'm politically correct, sometimes I'm not going to learn with people who think a different. When you have hospitality, for example, the other people can help us learn and define different pathways. So, for example, when we talk about inviting to a party and asking to dance, when you do that, you're willing to learn and learn with the differences. So I'm white, I'm a man, but we see that differences come from different places, and diversity comes from different places. So that influenced the consultative sector, and it's a sector that is disruptive because we understand now that diversity is not only what's politically correct, but it's a fundamental engine for the economy, and that generates new pathways. After the pandemic, we need new pathways so that people are happier, so that they can find alternatives for climate change, to create inclusion in Latin America. Find different pathways. And that's not only about diversity as a different tool. It's a tool to find these pathways in a context that is social, economic, and environmental.
Thank you, Sergio. Marcela, in Colombia, we have 5 steel companies, and 4 of them are led by men. You are the only exception to this rule. So when we observe the scenario in Latin America, this is repeated. You are the only woman general manager of a steel company among 64 companies in the region. Many women who are CEOs and the president of big organizations, unfortunately, they are the exception to the rule. Why don't we find these women represented in an equitative way in this power space? From this perspective, Marcela, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the gender equity and the importance of having more and more women at this position. Yes, that's right. We have to surmount many more obstacles to climb up this hierarchy in the corporate world. Alacero is related to the processes, high temperature, noise, and the scrap, the raw materials, and this goes against everything that goes in line with women that are more sensitive, delicate, dedicated. So here, the women represent 51% of Colombia population. However, 50% of these women who are working, they couldn't start working in Colombia because so we have 3 times more women without income compared to men in Colombia. So this difference is even bigger if we look at lower social levels. And in Colombia, we have this gap of 12%, so 88% of the job positions belong to men. I am convinced that the best ideas, they come from diverse perspectives, diverse cultural perspectives, gender differences. This brings wealth to the discussions. And we have seen through surveys that when women participate on the same level that men do, the results are better. Personally, I don't think that we are superior, better than men. I think that we came here to make something more transformational, inspirational, and we must extract the best from our employees. Okay, that's what we have to do. We have to foster, promote their performance, And I believe that women, we shouldn't, we should be recognized by who we are, and we must adapt because it's the diversity that contributes to the value and results of organizations. I really like a sentence from Prince Henry from England: when women have power, it increases immensely the life of everyone surrounding you. As Mariana said, for example, a woman in a leadership position, this woman has a lot of responsibility to help breaking this crystal roof and pave the way for other women. And currently, we have 810 employees, and 88 are women. Out of these 88 women, 23 are on leading positions like managers, directors, and the rest in operational admin positions, and only 6 women working at the plant. So I know this responsibility I have, and we started the equality gender measurements. We have some strategies for that. We have a follow-up program from UN, and we are focusing on gender equality. We have the management of equality policy, and we are holding workshops, debates about these virtual courses for our employees, and we include the family in these courses, and this is very important. We have some communication works on that, and talking about the behaviors, because sometimes they are conscious or sometimes it isn't. That's why we have this equality committee, and it's very important to participate actively and in this. And currently we have an action plan in order to close these gaps, bridge these gaps that we see going on. So to wrap up, I'd like to share a video with you showing a woman who is intelligent, feminine, with much emotional intelligence. She is an example, a key example showing that women can get to wherever they want. Hello, I'm going to tell you a part of my life story, and as a leader here, and 2013, I got a degree from Santander University in the steel industry, and I was breaking the paradigm of getting into this career because it used to belong to men. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life story. In 2013, I got a degree in Santander University, and I was disrupting this paradigm because this profession used to belong to men because it was a very strong, robust, and rude profession. So I was hired as the head of this team with 34 men, and here there were some things. For example, one woman accepted here. The processes are not easy here. They are really tough, and without the obstacles, we have been working together, focusing on empathy, respect, working focused on improving the results for the company. Thank you very much, this team that helped me break down this paradigm and received a woman as their leader in this process of empowerment as well. Very beautiful video. Thank you, Marcela. Mariana, we know that diversity and inclusion topic is taken seriously by Microsoft. Microsoft is one of the huge giant of global technology. We can see the challenges to fulfill the positions related to technology, taking into account that we are going through a digitalization phase in society, and the demand for this talent has been growing exponentially. When we put on the first phase of the plan diversity, and we fulfill these job positions with people from these vulnerable groups, so this challenge broadens, amplifies. What are the most difficult challenges faced up by you, by companies in your area, going after more inclusion and diversity? What are the key factors to promote inclusion in these technology careers? Thank you for this question. And let me start by the first part that has to do with the challenges that we see ahead. I think the main challenge, I categorize it in three parts. The first one is a cultural challenge. It is, for example, our mindset in different cultures. And as I gave the example before, in the case of Japan, it's a cultural challenge for companies, including at universities, how to choose a career, how girls elect a career. It's more restricted compared to the men when they choose their career. So in high school, I want to follow technology career or a human career. So I think this is the first barrier. I would start by the cultural part, what we can do, for example, to talk to these girls since the beginning and tell them the incredible possibilities, inspire them with the opportunities that they have ahead of them if they follow technology careers. The second point is this point of generating awareness, consciousness. It has to do with understanding. It has to do with talks like these, as this video that Marcela shared. It has to do with the example that Sergio gave us about his mother. It is this awareness, general awareness. For example, as a company, we think about who we are going to recruit and how can we improve, enhance our company. We have women in our pipeline for a determined position, or for any determined position, we have women. And for example, it's missing more training in the market, more we have to see what kind of ability is missing in the market, and then we go beyond this topic of only women. We go deeper in the diversity part. We have to understand the reason why this is important, why we care, why it's important for organizations. So first, it's the impact. It has been shown, proven that companies that are more open, more diverse, inclusive, they have more ideas, and we have more impact to the business itself, because we have different perspective over the same problems, because the solution is going to be different thanks to these different perspectives. Another point that is important is that we represent the society where we live in. So 50% of the world, they have different gender, or there is diversity of preference, race. All this diversity that we must represent in this world is extremely important. And for Microsoft, it's important because it represents our mission. It's to empower every person, every organization in the world to be able to achieve more. When we talk about everyone, we are talking about everyone. It's not A, B, or C. It's everyone. That's why diversity is fundamental. The second part of your question, it's about the challenges. And the challenges, we must have this clarity and work on these points I mentioned. The second part is more, for example, what are we going to do to promote more these ideas? What should we do about it? And there is a part that has much to do with working intentionally, to be intention oriented, to surmount these obstacles, break down these barriers. About relate to that saying, it's not only to invite to the parties, to ask the person to dance. So we are diverse. Doesn't matter who we are, where we come from. We are diverse, and inclusion requires much work because it requires the power of being able to listen to people, invite the person to speak, even if the person is a little shy, is not willing to do so. To have a space and a safe environment for employees to ensure that the other person will feel comfortable to do that, to perform that role, and understand each group of diversity. This is what we have to do. It requires to be allies. For example, women inviting more women. And ally is not only that, it's a hard word because to be ally means to be able to understand the other person, to speak on the behalf of another person when the person cannot speak. It requires to be able to invite different people to the table, so who want to be allies, and empower everyone to act, to take action, so that everybody feels safe about it. For example, to have safe environment, safe space where people feel empowered to speak, to make a change, to say when things are not going well or not. So it has to do with more trainings, availabilities to have this safe space, and to show that everyone has the skills, capability, and when we put all of these together, I know that it requires much work to do that, and it's required from all of us. That's why I'm really in love with this discussion. Everybody's here, willing to learn more. I'm taking notes about everything that Sergio is saying, Marcela is saying, because we keep on learning. And we must understand that this is the path. It's a path that we must keep on following. Inclusion has to do not only with women. We are talking about genders in general, and it has to do with broader aspects. In Microsoft, we have tons of diversities on which we work. How we ensure the diversity is included in Brazil. So Brazil, almost 50% of the population is black, for example. Do they have all the same opportunity? Do we have this representativeness? If we don't, what are we doing about it? So we've been working on these programs, that is how to develop technological skills, how to represent these groups. We have GLIM program. We represent LGBTQI. I don't know how to say all these acronyms in Spanish. For example, HOLA program. For example, the Latin Americans represented in the U.S., handicap, disability programs. And it's been a month that we opened an indigenous, native indigenous people. We have a program for that. It was recently launched, and this is an important part of the community to which we serve. And our mission is to empower everyone, every people, all these populations I mentioned.
Mariana, that was very interesting. I like to say that diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a muscle that we have to train. Inclusion is not going to happen naturally. We have to make affirmative actions. We have to have the intention to be inclusive. Otherwise, inclusion is not going to happen naturally. So, Sergio, Accenture is highlighted because of their diversity and inclusion program that has actions throughout the world. And it also produces knowledge and important content regarding this issue. We are here at the El Acero Summit, and I would like you to comment a little bit about the opportunities within the steel industry to work more on these diversity and inclusion issues. How can the industry be a catalyzer of these social transformations for a more inclusive world? Yes, it's very interesting. About 30 years ago, one of my first clients was from the steel industry, and I've been working with this industry for a long time. It's an innovative sector, and it deserves the respect and has to improve their exposition among young people and women. After the pandemic, we are lacking microchips and so on, but we're lacking talent. There are huge opportunities in the steel industry to attract diverse talent from women, people from different races and religion views, for example. Because of the ideas that these people bring, a diverse vision revolutionizes the industries. The steel industry, with its change history, can take advantage of all of that. About 4 or 5 years ago, we had a group of 1,000 people that outsourced technology and administrative processes for the oil industry. A group of young people of about 24 years old, a majority was women, and they all had a lot of tasks to complete, and they ended up working until late. So they were very, very tired because they worked a lot. And so they started to research cognitive robotics. And so they replaced a lot of tasks that were manually conducted by robots. And then they founded this group of cognitive robotics group that has over 300 people now. So young people that were about 23, 24 years old had this idea, and maybe a 40-year-old would not think about that. So what do I mean by that case? What do we want to do in the steel industry? Disruption comes from the margins. We have to seek that type of talent that we want to attract. In order to attract diverse talent, because we want to innovate and we need to bring young people who think differently with gender diversity. And this does not mean that we're politically correct. This is about something that the industry needs. And just like we've seen in the tech industry, there's a huge potential that has to be used in the steel industry. We have to attract these groups of people who will certainly lead the steel industry in the next few decades. There's a huge potential that we can use. The Industry 4.0 are the plants of the future. Since, when we're talking about integration of information, all of that is going to stem from the new generations and from the leadership of diversity. So we have to seek those talents for them to join our industry. How can we design companies that are focused on disruptive talent? How can we attract those talents? And how can I change my processes so that those talents achieve the disruption that the industry needs? Sergio, Mariana, Marcela, thank you so much. Our time is unfortunately over. It was a pleasure to be in a panel with so interesting and inspiring people. My final message, just like I told Mariana, is that inclusion is a muscle. Inclusion has to be intentional and has to be trained. Here are some of the greatest clients in diversity, like Gerdau and ArcelorMittal, and they have a public goal to have 30% of women in their organizations by 2030. This is intention. So inclusion has to be intentional. We cannot wait for inclusion to happen naturally. Inclusion has to be intentional. That would be my final message for all of you. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you, João. And now we're going to have Gustavo Werneck, CEO of Gerdau, on our stage. Gustavo, thank you so much again. The floor is yours. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our summit. So I would like to, first of all, thank you for conducting this event. We really admire your work, and we wish that you continue to be a leader to inspire many other women so that they can take on leadership roles in their companies and in the society. So thank you so much again. And just talking a little bit about something else, I would like to thank everyone who's watching us on our platforms. They have no idea how many people are involved in an event like this, how many professionals are taking care of the cameras, audio system, and so on. So I would like to thank the whole staff, because they are conducting their activities, but they are leaders, protagonists in an event like this. So Renata, I would like to thank the whole staff with Alacero and the teams in the organization of this event. For all those listening and watching us, people who are here in person, who have been tested for COVID and are vaccinated, and for all those listening to us and watching us at a distance, good morning again. I hope that you are going through these challenging times for the steel industry and in society with health. And I would like to share my feelings and my thoughts with you, those who have been impacted by the pandemic. And I'm very pleased to be the future president of Alacero in 2022 and 2023, continuing with the work of many other leaders. Maximo, thank you so much for your work. You've been an enthusiast in the search for competitiveness in the steel industry in Brazil and Latin America. You know all the difficulties that the sector faces, but you're also a protagonist seeking solutions. So Maximo, thank you so much. I hope that we all in the industry can continue to keep on collaborating and searching for solutions for all the problems that do not ever end. We are facing a lot of changes globally, but there's also recovery in the economies of the world, and that will bring new opportunities for Brazil and Latin America. You probably already know all these figures, but according to the IMF and its projections disclosed in October, The GDP in Latin America and in the Caribbean shall increase about 6% in 2021, and the GDP should increase another 3% in 2022. Of course, there was a retraction of 7% of the GDP in the region, but there's an evolution of steel production in Latin America that will probably increase 16% in 2021 compared to last year, so totaling 65 million tons of crude steel. So this reinforces the importance of steel as a key input in a economic recovery scenario. The industry in Latin America is very relevant in generating jobs and wealth. Between direct and indirect jobs, it's over 1.2 million jobs. So with that, we highlight the importance of the industry as a driver of economic and social development in the communities and localities where we are present. I would also like to highlight that steel is a non-substitutable input. It's present in the lives of people throughout the world, in our homes, in our transportation vehicles. It's present in the production of wind and solar energy. During the pandemic, steel was present in the construction of hospitals, PPEs, medical equipment, and the protagonism of our companies was important and helped save thousands of lives in Latin America. I would also like to point out the importance of steel in the last few years as essential for the supply chain, especially for companies that could not stop working. So the agricultural sector, for example, the machine companies, and so they were very important during the pandemic. We also note that the steel industry wants to discuss its role regarding climate change. This has been debated a lot, especially regarding GHG gases. The Latin American steel industry will take huge steps in the next coming years with the decarbonization of the sector, either through new processes and improvement of current processes. We already produce a more sustainable and cleaner steel. Latin America emits about 1.6 tons of equivalent CO2 per ton of steel produced, compared to 2.1 tons of CO2 in China. But I also think that we have to build solutions and policies to contribute to the transformation of the industry and for a sustainable development without being unfairly penalized with taxes and metrics that make the transformation difficult. I would also like to talk about, on the climate agenda, that the Brazilian industry was a pioneer using plant-based coal, allowing a production of steel with a low carbon footprint and differentiating the industry from competitors. Today, 11% of the steel production in Brazil is plant-based coal. This is a renewable source of energy because it's produced by wood extracted from planted forests. So the trees that are available in a period of 5 to 10 years, they are converted into plant-based coal to feed the furnaces. And so the development of this activity, the sequestration of CO2, abates the emissions during the production of steel, making the steel more sustainable.
We have Alacero's role to follow closely all these challenges and opportunities which are posed to the industries. With this in mind, we have an association that represents 95% of the steel produced in Latin America, and we have been working in bid projects. It's really relevant, and the aim here is to invest in initiatives in the region, elaborating financing cooperation instruments to amplify the impact of our region in this field. And one of the fronts that we've been working together with the bid is the decarbonization of the sector, together with IDB. And the ESG agenda is increasingly important and crucial to make decisions in the steel industry in all dimensions, environmental, social, and governance part, aiming at a sustainable growth. And bearing that in mind, I understand that our industry must advance more and more, taking strides, as it was thoroughly mentioned in this previous panel, reflecting on the work environment, all the diversity that we have in our society. I strongly believe that companies must act as a transformation agents, engaging people with this topic, bringing this topic of diversity inclusion to the leadership position and decision-making positions. Everyone who is here and listening to us as leaders that we are, to create a healthier and respectful environment with everyone. And I believe that companies must be more and more united, going after partnerships that contribute to social issues that we have in Latin America. And I also mention inequality, poverty that we have been experiencing in Latin America, and they were intensified due to the pandemic. And with that in mind, just as an example, I'm sharing with you an initiative that we launched recently at Gerdau as part of our commitment is to contribute to the solution of the big dilemmas and problems in society, especially for changing the housing issues that we have in Brazil. This program that we call it a reform that transforms, it will contribute with the improvement of 13,000 or over it housing for people who need it, and we have a credit grant with interest rate lower than the average in the market, helping diminishing the social vulnerability. And we have the Latin America steel industry. I see it as relevant because we have several competitive asymmetries before our global players, and they affect in a decisive way the production of steel in our region. And it's important to equalize the structural issues that we have among the nations, and we have a heavy tax load, and we have logistic bottlenecks, low offer of credit, financing, and therefore it's paramount that the local managers here must take effective actions thinking about the local industries. We look in a positive way these scenarios in this region. We can see logistic infrastructure projects going on, and we have positive advancements that have been going on in the public and private initiatives. As Paulo said, the low level of consumption per capita in Latin America, the average in Latin America is 120 kilos per person a year. I think Paulo mentioned that, and Colombia, it was mentioned, 80 kilos per person per capita, and Peru is 113 kilograms. Although the consumption of steel in Latin America must advance at 28-29% this year, we are very far away from the world average of 228 kilos per inhabitant, and we have plenty of opportunity to evolve in this aspect, putting steel as a paramount, very irreplaceable material for Latin America. So I'd like to highlight this importance for the companies here in this region to do their homework and see the importance they have and look at digital transformation. And in my point of view, undoubtedly, this is the path to improve the steel industry. We also have perspectives from the 4.0 industry. We have several opportunities to enable steel companies to change the way we generate data, improvements to improve performance. And this is increasingly more present on a daily basis, and we can improve our performance and innovation digitalization. They have put us closer to our clients. Who could ever imagine that our steel industry would be selling steel online? It's one digital phenomenon. So this is a step that was taken some years ago, but we had to change our attitude, habits, and be closer to our clients. And by doing that, we are going to have more opportunities. And we are talking about the steel industry. And I see in it the challenges that came from the reorganization of the global supply chains that we have seen in the last few years, freights and so on. We are going to have more encouragement, incentives for local purchase that was mentioned today in the sessions that we had. And with that, the strengthening for the Latin American market is really important. We work in a more collaborative way in a network, as Spinelli said when he talked about Vale, as it is my desire to be able to translate this desire on plans, in fact, that can become concrete in a very short time. And new markets and demands will be open for Latin American countries. We must be prepared to be able to provide our clients with good quality products and a broad portfolio. I'd like to wrap up my presentation here just mentioning that I hope that every one of us from the steel industry in Latin America, we can strengthen our partnership to take steps which are not small ones, and that we can offer our value, our chain value, and offer our products to become part of the solutions. And I keep on trusting that in our industry in Latin America, and the first steps were taken. I'd like to thank you, everyone who is present here, who is watching us online, and thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gustavo, for your view, your kind words. Thank you for the kind words that you mentioned me in the beginning. I'd like to extend my special thanks to the whole team, and I learned a lot these 2 days. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, everyone who participated in this round of gathering. In the metal mechanic chain in the region. As we said, it's very important to bear in mind everything that we talked about this today, to make it transcend this space, to transform them in actions and concrete objectives. So you are invited to continue in the platform. Now at 2, our sponsor, Vale, will be giving us a workshop very interesting about sustainability. In addition to that, you can be connected with other viewers who are participating in the networking tables, generating talks for the future of our industry. For the journalists online, don't forget, at 2:30 today, we are going to have the press conference. For more information, you can get in touch with the help desk using the platform. So before saying goodbye, we invite you to answer the survey so that we keep on improving our event every year. Thank you very much for everyone who followed us in person or remotely. It was a pleasure to share this journey with you. See you next year here in São Paulo. Bye-bye.
Há 120 anos, a família Gerdau plantou a raiz de um sonho. Uma fábrica de pregos que virou uma das principais produtoras de aço do mundo. Enquanto crescíamos, fomos nos entrelaçando com a vida das pessoas. Hoje, reafirmamos nosso compromisso com o futuro, atuando em questões urgentes como habitação e sustentabilidade. Porque tão importante quanto o que colhemos são as sementes que deixamos para o amanhã. Gerdau 120 anos. O futuro se molda.
Pensar, sorrir, abrir, fechar, prender, unir, subir, voar, comer, dormir, beber, sonhar. Aço é ação. Aço é ArcelorMittal, criando aços inteligentes para um mundo melhor.
Tudo na natureza está interligado. A Vale entende que não dá para separar a Amazônia das pessoas que dependem dela, como o apicultor e a polinização na floresta, ou o extrativista e a colheita sustentável do jaborandi.
A gente vive da mata e com a mata. A gente vive em harmonia com ela.
Cuidar das florestas hoje é transformar o amanhã de todos. Vale.
Creemos en las ideas, en el diseño, en la gente y en su potencial. Nuestra pasión es innovar con el acero y hacerlo junto a nuestros clientes nos llena de orgullo. Acesco, la confianza que nos une. El mejor camino es el que recorremos juntos. Es el que construimos con esfuerzo y visión. Megaobras como estas llevan por dentro el sello de calidad Acesco. Acesco, la confianza que nos une.
CAP significa en Chile y el mundo acero de calidad. Acero producido con tecnología de punta y a partir de las mejores materias primas. Acero que sustenta el crecimiento de un país y que se hace presente en exigentes mercados internacionales. CAP Acero, conocida también como Compañía Siderúrgica Huachipato, está situada en Talcahuano, a 500 kilómetros de Santiago, en plena bahía de San Vicente. Su estratégica ubicación en la mitad de Chile continental, con terminal marítimo propio y conexiones viales y ferroviarias, favorecen su logística de recepción y despacho de productos. La empresa es parte del Grupo CAP, el principal productor de minerales de hierro y pellets en la costa americana del Pacífico, el mayor productor siderúrgico en Chile y el más importante procesador de acero del Cono Sur. La planta de Huachipato es la única siderúrgica integrada del país, dado que su proceso se inicia a partir de las materias primas básicas, mineral de hierro, carbón y caliza. Un proceso de estas características garantiza productos de acero de elevada pureza y calidad. En Chile, sus principales mercados son la minería, la industria y la construcción. Actualmente la empresa ha focalizado su negocio hacia la línea de productos largos. Dentro de esta hay 4 grandes familias de productos en las que CAP Acero se ha especializado, atendiendo los requerimientos de sus clientes y liderando su participación en el mercado interno. Barras gruesas, alambrón, barras para refuerzo de hormigón y aceros especiales.
Sabemos que todo está conectado en la naturaleza y que lo mismo se pasa para la energía y los procesos de producción modernos, ya que también trabajan con ecosistemas complejos vinculados digitalmente. Con nuestra solución, que es una simbiosis de planificación, producción y gestión energética, puedes crear una cadena de suministro sostenible y así asegurar su ventaja competitiva. ¿Estás listo para extender la mano para que juntos podamos percibir la complejidad, actuar de manera inteligente y adaptarnos?